Hello, so ignore the fact I look like an actual 2-year-old newborn child with this hair, but my hair is greasy as hell, so we're just gonna roll with it. It's by far the most requested workout kind of related video that I get. Everyone's always like, I want to see like a full week of training, full week of your actual workouts, how you actually train. So today in the UK, the gyms actually did reopen. This footage is from 2 weeks ago when I was still training at home, but it's still going to be a very, very useful video, and you can still definitely take some inspiration from it because I actually have a barbell and some plates to be training with from home. So basically you can do these workouts in the gym and all you will need is a barbell and weights, and then anything I've done with bands you can substitute that in for a machine, the cable machine, stuff like that. So it's very, very adaptable, gym or home. Me personally, I actually have a coach, and to me, this is just my opinion, but I think it's really quite disrespectful to share my entire training plan that they have spent a lot of time and effort putting in for me, because that's essentially me giving away their work for free, which isn't fair on them. So I actually had a bit of a niggling injury, so I kind of had to adapt my workouts so they're not exact to what my coach has me do, but it's still the training that I've been doing at home for the past 4 weeks because my injury has only just really left the building. So yeah, this is my full week of workouts that I've been doing at home. Now I'm back in the gym, not much changes. It's very, very similar, other than I tend to go heavier on things like lunges and squats because obviously I've got a squat rack in the gym and I can't press like 40 to like 60-70 kilograms over my head. I'm not that strong. So a brief overview of my training before I get into the workouts. I personally train 5 times a week, 3 lower, 2 upper, and this training plan is suited to me, my goals, my abilities, my fitness levels. Do not just take this full week of workouts and say, right, I'm gonna do that and it's gonna make me look like her. One, you will never look like someone else no matter how hard you try. Become a better version of yourself, yes, but do not follow someone's workout plan expecting to get the exact same results they did. It's not going to happen. And 2, like I said, this is suited to me, my goals, my personal fitness levels. We will all have different goals, all have different fitness levels, so definitely do not copy and paste this. Take inspiration, of course, if you are on like a similar fitness level to me, then definitely go ahead and give some of the workouts a go, but yeah, just a little disclaimer there. So I have my laptop and I'm just gonna get into the voiceover now. And my first session is glutes and hamstrings. So the first move that I'm doing here is some barbell hip thrusts. I actually bought a step to be able to get the right height for these, but ideally you want most of the movement to be coming from the sternum down, 90-degree angle with your shins when you get to the top of the movement, and you want to keep your chin tucked, making sure you're locking out properly at the top of each rep. So moving on to Romanian deadlifts, I'm doing these with a barbell. Key point here is it's a hip hinge movement. Do not just bend forwards to move the weight. You need to initiate the movement by pushing your hips back. Ideally you want to imagine that you're trying to press something behind you with your bum. Do give your glutes a squeeze at the top, but do not hyperextend or overdo it. So then moving on to some glute focused barbell reverse lunges. So what I mean by glute focus is I'm actually taking pretty wide strides back just to activate more of my glutes and a little bit less of my quads, although obviously they are still working when I'm doing these. It's important when you're doing a lunge to make sure that your knee is staying in line with your foot. What I mean by this is that your knee can go over your foot, but you don't want it to be wobbling inwards or outwards. You want it to be nice and stable. So then I am moving on to some side lying clam raises. They're a lot harder than they look. You basically want to focus on opening up your legs like a clam, hence the name. And making sure you're getting a full range of motion. Making sure that the non-working glute is touching the floor at the bottom of each rep. Oh my god, the pain. Then moving on to some banded kickbacks. The key here is to make sure that you keep your core nice and braced and keep your spine as neutral as you can. There will naturally be a little bit of a curve in the lower region of your spine, but you do not want any excessive curvature going on here, because what that means is you're actually taking some of the tension off your glutes and putting it through your lower back. A lot of people on Instagram do this. There is like a big curve, like their shoulders are here, their back goes like this, and then it's their bum. And me personally, when I actually do that, I do not feel this in my glutes at all. It doesn't look as cute when you do it properly and you're bracing your core, and it makes you look a little bit thicker. It doesn't make your waist look as skinny, but honestly, you need to be doing the movement right, not just so that it looks good. So yeah, I do see a lot of people going wrong with that, so just make sure that you are really bracing your core and keeping it nice and tight to hold you in a stable position, so all the tension is just going on your glutes. Then moving on to my second session of the week, which is an upper session, and both of my upper sessions are split into push and pull. So I don't do a push session and a pull session, I basically have a mixture of both in each. My aim with my upper body at the moment is actually just to maintain what I've got, so I don't do like a ton of volume on my upper body at the moment, because the main aim is just to maintain. I'm not currently interested in building much more muscle on my upper body. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. So sumo deadlifts first, wide stance, feet pointing outwards, and your arms will come inside of your knees. So with a conventional deadlift, your arms would be on the outside. With a sumo, your hands are on the inside of your knees. As you come down to grab the bar with these, roll your shoulders back, and as you grab the bar, squeeze your lats to really bring your shoulders back. And from there, in terms of the actual movement, to avoid it just becoming basically a sumo squat holding a barbell, my main cue for this is basically when you have the bar at the top, so you've lifted it from the floor to the top, the bar is at hip height. From that moment, you want to be thinking from the bar being at your hips to the bar reaching your knees, RDL, hip hinge. At the end of the day, it is a deadlift, it is a hip hinge movement, it is not a full squat. That is not what we're doing here. So from the hip to the knee, think RDL, think push those hips back as far as you can, and then once the bar reaches your knees, from the knee to the floor, you are okay to squat to get the bar and the plates down to the bottom. RDL from the hip to the knee, from the knee to the floor, squat. Moving on, I am then doing some meadow rows. These are actually, they're not new to me, I had these in my last home cycle, but they're definitely difficult to get used to say the least, but they're a really good exercise. So basically, where you are gonna want to be feeling this is in your rear delts or the top of your back, so your upper back region. As with any back movement, the key with this is to make sure that you are focusing on the stretch and the squeeze. So you will notice I am letting my arm come all the way down on each rep, and then as I row it up, I'm making sure that it's always under control. I'm not doing super fast reps, I'm keeping it slow and controlled and making sure I'm getting the full range of motion, really stretching out my back before pulling back in. And because you're pulling back into here with meadow rows rather than pulling back like this, like you would with say a seated row or a standard T-bar row, targeting more of your rear delts and your upper back. Moving on to a kneeling landmine press for my shoulders. I have been actually loving doing these from home. It's something that I'm not really an upper body queen, but I do actually look forward to doing these. So you can do these half kneeling, full kneeling like myself, just whichever is more comfortable for you. I tried doing these half kneeling because they are meant to be half kneeling, and I just found it really uncomfortable. So when you're in your preferred position, you basically grab the end of the barbell and push it up. It's essentially a shoulder press, just a more interesting way of doing them, and I actually found that I much prefer doing my shoulder press movements in this way rather than like a standard barbell shoulder press or a dumbbell shoulder press. I just get a really good I just get a really good connection with my shoulders when doing them landmine style. So moving on, I'm then doing some floor presses, and I do not train chest to find it very uncomfortable. So these are a tricep focused floor press. You can do them more chest focused, but the grip here and the amount of flexion I'm getting in my elbow makes them much more tricep focused. I do not feel this in my chest at all. So you want to come down, feel a big stretch in your triceps, a lot of flexion in your elbows before pressing back up using your triceps, of course. And then my camera died, but I actually supersetted those And then my camera died, but I actually supersetted those with hammer curls. If you don't know what a hammer curl is, it's a bicep curl, but it's a different variation. The difference being with a bicep curl, you've got this kind of a grip, which is a supinated grip, and your palms are facing upwards. We learned on my PT course, it was like supinated, think like you're going to catch a bowl of soup. You wouldn't catch it like that, which would be pronated. You'd catch it like that, so it's supinated, and that's just really, really stuck in my brain. But that would be a standard bicep curl. With hammer curls, your palms are facing each other, but it's the same form tip, so you want to keep your elbows nice and pinched into your sides. Avoid swinging the weight up with the rest of your body. Keep your body as still as you possibly can, and make sure that it is your biceps pulling up the weight. You're not swinging it up, and you're not having to flare your elbows loads to get the weight up, aka cheating the reps. And then it's time for my second lower body session of the week, which is quads and glutes. First we have Bulgarian split squats. Before I get into these are meant to be done at front rack, aka the barbell is actually at the front of you rather than being on your back. I'm doing them with the bar on my back here because I found that, I don't know why, but something in my lower back goes, which is where I had the injury a couple of weeks ago. When I do these front rack, I think it's because my balance is like a little bit skew with, because I'm just not used to holding the weight there. So for this session, because I was easing myself back into training after my little injury, I decided to just do these with the rack on my back, but these are meant to be front racked Bulgarian split squats. So Bulgarian split squats, you're going to have one leg on an elevated surface. So I'm using a step here, but if you're in the gym, you can use a bench. If you're at home and you don't have a step, you can use a sofa, you can use a chair, and essentially coming all the way down. I'm doing these more quad focused, which basically means I'm keeping my torso more upright and basically coming straight up and down. If you want to do these more glute focused, and what you're going to want to do for that is take a wider stride away from the bench, and with your upper body, rather than coming down at a more straight angle and keeping your torso as upright as possible, you're going to want to lean forwards a bit and you kind of sink back into it like that. Trust me, it puts so much more emphasis on your glutes. But for me, these are a more quad focused movement in my program whilst I was training from home. Your knee isn't going out of line with your foot, so going over the edge of your foot or caving inwards. You want to make sure it's staying in line with your foot throughout, just to avoid an injury, putting extra stress on your joints. Trust me, as someone who has dodgy knees, I know when I've done this, because I really, really feel it the next few days. Make sure that that foot stays in line, in alignment with your foot and your toes. So then, banded barbell glute bridges. So basically with these, it's different from the hip thrust because it's from the floor. And my main tip for these is just to make sure that you are really, really pushing through your heels. And if you are using a band, you must make sure that the band is not causing your knees to cave inwards. That makes the band pretty redundant. You need to make sure that it is not causing your knees to cave inwards, and you are keeping the tension in the band and pushing out against it throughout the entire movement. The difference between a glute bridge and a hip thrust is, obviously a hip thrust is done from a bench, a step, sofa, chair, depending on where you are, and a glute bridge is done from the floor. A hip thrust has more range of motion. A glute bridge, as you can see, has a much shorter range of motion. And moving on to front squats, these actually felt completely fine on my lower back and left glute, which is where I had the injury, so these were okay to do. So front squats, it just puts more emphasis on your quads over your glutes compared to a back squat. Arm placement, my arm should actually be considerably higher than this, and my arm should basically be more parallel with the floor, but I've got really quite poor wrist flexibility, which means it's actually not possible for me to do that. So that's why my arm placement is a little different, just because I find it really, really uncomfortable bringing my arms any higher than that. But yeah, same form tips as you would give with a standard squat, which is to just make sure, whoa, I've just gone really, really pale, the sun's just come out. Just to make sure that you are breaking at the hips and the knees simultaneously. Something I see on Instagram a lot is people really like basically duck arsing and pushing their hips back, like really far back, like really sticking their bum out before they go into a squat, puts you at an increased risk of having a butt wink. Now I actually do have that in another type of squat that I'm gonna do, which you will see, and I'm gonna talk you through that then. But essentially, pushing your hips so far back at the top of a squat before you even come down into it is gonna give you that increased risk of having a butt wink at the bottom. And with squats, I am always just pushing through my entire foot. I don't tend to focus on pushing through my heel with squats personally. I just like to focus on basically tripod gripping the floor with the two balls of your feet at the front and your heel at the back. What I find is that this helps me so much with my ankle stability, and it stops my ankles from caving in, which happens quite a lot to me on squats. If I'm not paying attention to the gripping of my foot, or if I'm focusing on too much on pushing through my heel for more glute activation, I find that that's when my ankles start caving inwards, and that's when I can start having some knee caving inwards as well. So that's something that I'm really aware of, and I always like to make sure I've got the tripod grip with my foot and I'm pushing through basically my entire foot, not just the heel, not just the front, but my entire foot, and spreading my weight evenly. So these were supersetted with some lateral band walks. Oh my god guys, this band is so tough. It's an Alphalete one. I think it's like the medium strength one, but it's really tough. So with lateral band walks, you want to make sure that your shins are staying vertical throughout, and again, like I spoke about with the glute bridges, you want to make sure that you are not letting the band make your knees cave inwards, and you're staying pushing out against the band throughout, keeping constant tension in the band. So my fourth session is then an upper body workout, like I said, split into push and pull. So I've got a mixture of push and pull movements in both my upper body days. So starting off with a barbell shoulder press. Now one thing that I would say is like the key thing to focus on here is bracing your core and engaging your glutes, that basically your torso is staying in a stable position. The thing that can end up happening if you do not pay attention to this and you are not bracing your core efficiently is you can actually put a lot of stress through your lower back when you're pressing above your head, instead of a lot of tension coming through your shoulders, because you're not stable enough. The tension can actually end up going through your lower back, so you need to be careful with that. Make sure that you are properly bracing your core, and engaging your glutes can help with that. So don't like stick your ass out like a little ducky duck. You want to make sure that you are basically bracing everything, sucking in, keeping that nice and tight, and all the movement coming from your shoulders upwards. You're going to need to make sure that you move your head back as you press above, and then you move your head forwards, press above, move your head forwards, move it back, just to make sure that you don't bash yourself in the face. I've done it before. It's not very pleasant, just saying. Then moving on to bent over rows. That label sticking out my shorts is really grinding my gears. Why did I not just cut it out? So these are supinated barbell bent over rows. So like I said, you're catching the soup, underhand grip, and a pretty narrow grip. So you basically want to grip the bar about shoulder width apart, nothing wider than that. To initiate the movement like an RDL, hinge those hips back. Do not just bend forwards. You're gonna excessively probably end up rounding your back there and not keep your spine as neutral as it needs to be. So hinge those hips back until you're in a comfortable position, and then you basically want to keep your spine neutral, keep your neck in line with that. So when you're doing deadlifts, when you're doing bent over rows, stuff like that, what you don't want to be doing is bending forwards and then your neck poking up and you're like staring forwards. You're going to put a lot of stress through your neck. Make sure that you're not looking around, just everything neutral, everything in line, streamlined. We love to see it. And then in terms of the rowing movement, you literally just row it in. Make sure that you keep your elbows as close into your sides as you can. Keep it nice and tight, and like I said with the meadow rows that I spoke about, stretch and squeeze is everything with your back movement. So make sure that you are focusing on really stretching out your back, pulling in and squeezing. Then moving on to a banded lat pull down. So again, the key here is the stretch and the squeeze. Stretch all the way up to really stretch out your lats. And then as you pull down, you want to pull down and squeeze between your shoulder blades. Basically with a lat pull down, the grip would be wider for these, but my handles are actually both broken, so I had to just use the band and I could not get a wider grip on it than this. So we got to work with what we've got. The lighting is changing changing so much. I'm so sorry about that. And if you are in the gym and you've got a bar, or you're lucky enough to not have broken handles for your resistance bands at home, then make sure that you have got a nice wide grip to make sure that you're getting as much lat engagement as possible. Training your lats, ladies, super important if you are wanting to create the illusion of a smaller waist and add more shape to your physique. Building your lats can be it's so underrated. Training upper body is so underrated. Building your shoulders, building yourself a solid pair of lats is gonna broaden your upper body, making your waist look smaller. Of course, we do not need to make our waist look smaller, but I know it's something that people are interested in, and that's one way of going about it. You can create the illusion by building shape up top. Okay, and then moving on to some plate overhead tricep extensions. So you basically want to keep your elbows as close into the side of your head as you possibly can here. Lower the dumbbell or the plate, like I'm using here, as far as you can behind your head. My memory card died, that's why that clip is so short. But lower the dumbbell or the plate as far as you can behind your head. Get a good stretch in your triceps and then press up above your head, fully extending. So moving on to a very rare sight for me, which is actually some core work. And we're going to actually critique my form here a little, because boy oh boy do I have a weak core. So first I'm doing a hollow hold here. So as you will see, I basically tried to suck my lower back into the floor, but as soon as I went into the hollow hold position, my lower back rises off the floor. This is something you want to avoid. So basically do as I say, not as I do. But I appear to have a very weak core, which doesn't surprise me because I literally train it once every 6 months. For hollow hold, you want to make sure that you don't have any curve in your lower back. Your lower back is sucked into the floor. So before you initiate the movement, what I like to do is lay in the position that comes natural to me, which is I do tend to have a little bit of a curve when I lie down in my back, just because of my bum and all that sort of stuff. And then I basically try and suck my belly button into the floor, like suck my belly button into my spine, and therefore suck my belly button down to the floor and reduce that gap, trying to keep my lower back as flat to the ground as I possibly can. But it's very, very difficult. But for me, my lower back does end up having a little bit of a curve in it, but as you'll see, it's nothing compared to at the start, where I have quite a significant curve in my lower back. And then moving on to some alternating heel touches. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone will have seen these before. It's really nothing new. In terms of the hollow hold, that's going to target more of your like total ab area. In terms of these, it's more of your obliques, so basically the sides of your waist. Again, I really don't train core that often. I'm not a pro at it, but these are pretty simple to do. You're essentially shrugging side to side, again keeping your lower back sucked into the floor and grabbing your toes and contracting your obliques as you do each rep. Then on to my final session of the week, which is again glutes and quads, my favorite muscles to train. So the first movement again is hip thrust. I have already given you form tips on these, so we will just instead admire the setup that I've got at home. That is just beautiful stuff. But as you can see, the movement is still coming from the ribs down. My ribs are pretty much stationary, chin staying tucked, nice lockout at the top, pushing through my heels. Bob's your uncle, fun as your aunt. Moving on to narrow stance heel elevated goblet squats. Now here is where I am butt winking, and I actually notice that I do this more when I'm doing a narrow stance squat. So to go over the form for the actual movement, your heels are elevated, which is going to put more emphasis on your quads. I don't have a dumbbell, so I'm just holding plates on top of each other to make my own dumbbell, but with anything goblet, you're basically holding it to your chest. Really slow tempo on these, so slow these right down. Yeah, normal squatting movement, but a very narrow stance, so my feet are pretty close together. Now in terms of the butt wink on these, like I said, noticed that I tend to only butt wink really noticeably anyway when I'm doing something narrow stance. This is something I'm currently actually looking into. I'm not 100% sure why this happens. I watched a really good video by, I'm gonna butcher his name, I think it's Eugene Teo. I've definitely said that wrong, and he's like such a respectable person, so I'm really sorry. He has a whole video on the butt wink, and a lot of people when they have a butt wink issue will just say hip mobility, hip mobility, hip mobility. It can be a hip mobility issue. It can also actually be a lower spine mobility and flexibility issue too. It can be above, it can be below. I assess the footage and how I do narrow stance squats, and I do not push my hips back first. That's not what's going on here for me. That's not what's causing the butt winks. I do think it's a mobility issue. I've got a feeling that for me it's more of a lower spine, lumbar region, flexibility, mobility issue rather than a hip mobility issue, just because I do actually do quite a lot of mobility and flexibility work for my hips. But again, I'm really not an expert on this, but I'm just saying, if you do notice that you have a butt wink, first of all, go and watch the video that I have just mentioned. Definitely do your own research, speak to someone else. And my first part of call, if you are noticing that you've got a butt wink, is to address the top of the squat and the setup for the squat before you come down into it, because I've had clients send me form videos before of their squats where they're butt winking, and what I notice is they really shoot their hips back. They basically break at the hips before they break at the knee, if that makes sense. They really like shoot their hips back, basically duck arse it and then come down into the squat. And as soon as I say to them, look, think about breaking at the hip and the knee at the same time, think about just sitting down, don't think about like pushing your hips back first, don't think about it too much, literally just think about sitting down. And then they send me another video of them doing it. 90% of cases the butt wink is gone. So that would be my first suggestion, but other than that, mobility work could also be something that helps with this. And I actually then supersetted these with just body weight only, walking lunges, as many reps as possible. I don't have any footage of this, but as I've spoken about 2 different types of lunges or split squats in this video now, so hopefully you get the point with like the knee and making sure that everything is in stable and in alignment. But then moving on to a cable, or in my case a band abduction. So here you want to focus on basically moving your leg away from the midline of your body, shifting your knee away from the midline of your body. This is going to target your glute medius, which forms a significant part of your upper glute. When you're doing these, it's important to make sure that basically the rest of you stays as stationary as possible, and it's just that leg doing the abduction movement. And obviously you're going to do these on both legs, but everything else should stay as stable as possible. These are then supersetted with some floor seated band abductions, so pressing out against that band. As you will see here, I actually let my feet like rotate outwards and like roll around, just so I can get more range of motion. I find if I leave my feet flat on the floor, I just do not get along with these at all, don't really get a good mind to muscle connection. So that is my personal preference for these. I like to let my feet kind of roll around a little bit. But then final session of this workout, final session of the week, is frog pumps, and the setup for these. Thank you, Xander, because he's literally made me feel so disgustingly sick. So I've just put plates on a pillow to cushion my hips and make sure that I'm not in any kind of pain. So with frog pumps, you basically get in a froggy stretch position with your legs, so your feet together and your knees are kind of like outwards like a frog. Something that I also like to do, not everyone does this, but I personally believe that if you're doing a frog pump you should be doing this, is looking forward and keeping my chin tucked, so using something to prop my head up. I just find I get more kind of range of motion and a better connection with my glutes if I do this. As you can see, your gal was struggling, but yeah, this was a solid way to finish the session. So yeah, that is my full week of workouts. I feel like I've gone really in depth with those form tips. I hope it's been useful. If you did enjoy the video, then give it a thumbs up. If there's any other kind of workout videos you want to see now that I'm back to the gym, let me know and I will definitely get those filmed. Subscribe if you want it and you haven't already. And yeah, I hope it was an interesting insight into how I actually train. As you will see with the workouts that I post for you guys on Instagram, the workouts that I post on here, I'm not fobbing you off. I'm not showing you workouts that are not similar at all to what I do. The workouts I post, they might not be in my program, but they are very, very, very similar to how I would train. Most of them are sessions that I have had in programs that I've written for myself before, or in programs that my coach has given to me before, because I've been with him for a fair few months now, since about April. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you found it useful, and I'm gonna go and get a drink because my voice is going, because chatter, 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 I talk too